The stage was silent. Not the polite silence of an audience waiting for something average. This was the silence of thousands of people who had stopped breathing at exactly the same moment, staring at a teenage boy in a wheelchair slowly rolling toward a grand piano at the center of America's Got Talent. His name was Ethan Cole. 17 years old. And the moment he appeared from behind the curtain, a murmur rippled through the crowd, not cruelty, but shock. Because no one had seen this coming. The producers hadn't shown him in the pre-show packages. The cameras hadn't lingered on him backstage. Ethan had rolled, into this moment completely alone, with nothing to offer the world except his hands and whatever was living inside his chest. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair. He had seen everything in his 2 decades of judging talent shows. He had heard voices that shook the rafters, watched dancers defy gravity, sat through magic acts that made the laws of physics seem like suggestions. But something about this boy made him go still. Maybe it was the way Ethan held himself, not with the forced confidence of someone performing courage, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had already survived the worst thing that would ever happen to him. "What's your story?" Simon asked, because Simon always asked. Ethan looked out at the crowd before answering. 3 years ago I was playing soccer with my friends, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm for someone saying what he was about to say. A car hit me. I was in a coma for 6 weeks. When I woke up, I couldn't walk anymore. But I could still move my hands. He looked down at his fingers. So I started playing piano. No one in that audience moved. "Why piano?" one of the other judges asked softly. Ethan almost smiled. "Because my mom used to play. She passed away 2 years before the accident. I never learned while she was alive. I thought I had more time." He paused. The weight of that sentence settled over the entire theater like snow. "I don't make that mistake anymore." Simon said nothing. He nodded once. Ethan turned to face the piano. What happened next lasted 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Later, when the clip would be watched by 40 million people around the world, commenters would struggle to describe what they heard. Some called it a classical piece reimagined. Some called it original. Some didn't even try to use musical vocabulary, they just wrote things like, "I haven't cried like this since my mother died," and "I had to pull over my car because I couldn't see the road." One comment, liked over 200,000 times, simply said, "He played like someone who had already lost everything and found something better on the other side." But in the room, in that theater, none of those words existed yet. There was only the music. And the music was not performing. It was not showing off. It was not trying to impress 5 judges on a television show. It was a 17-year-old boy talking to his dead mother through the only language they had ever shared, the language she never got to teach him, the language he had to learn alone in a hospital room with one working arm and a YouTube tutorial and more grief than any teenager should ever carry. Halfway through, Simon Cowell lowered his face into his hands. He didn't look up for a long time. When the final note faded, there was 1 second, just one, of absolute silence. And then the crowd exploded. Not polite applause. Not the measured appreciation of people following social cues. 5,000 people standing at once, screaming, because something real had just happened in front of them and their bodies needed to respond. Simon stood last. He always stood last. But he stood. He walked to his microphone and the crowd slowly went quiet, because they knew. They had seen that look on Simon's face before. Not often. Not just for anyone. "I've been doing this for a very long time," Simon said. His voice was different. Quieter. "And I can always tell the difference between someone who is performing and someone who is actually saying something." He stopped. Looked at Ethan directly. "You were saying something." Then Simon Cowell reached across and pressed the golden buzzer. The gold confetti exploded from the ceiling like a storm. Ethan didn't scream. He didn't jump up, he couldn't. He just sat at the piano while the gold fell around him, and he put his face in his hands, and he cried. Not from sadness. From something that doesn't have a name. From the feeling of being seen completely, for the first time, by a world that almost never stopped moving long enough to look. His mother had played piano. He had never learned while she was alive. Now 40 million people would hear him play in her memory, and somewhere in the architecture of whatever we believe in, maybe she heard it too. America's Got Talent had given him the stage. But Ethan Cole had given them something they hadn't expected to receive that evening. He had given them proof that some things survive everything.